इस सप्ताह वर्ल्ड व्यू का एक विशेष संस्करण। जैसे ही दुनिया ईरान के खिलाफ ट्रंप की विनाशकारी परमाणु धमकियों से उबरकर पाकिस्तान और अन्य देशों द्वारा कराई गई युद्ध विराम की तरफ बढ़ी, एक व्यक्ति इस पर सबसे बारीकी से नजर रखे हुआ था। आज हम उसी व्यक्ति राफेल ग्रॉसी से बातचीत कर रहे हैं, जो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय परमाणु ऊर्जा एजेंसी IAEA के महानिदेशक हैं। महत्वपूर्ण बात यह भी है कि वे इस साल संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासचिव बनने की दौड़ में सबसे आगे हैं। नमस्कार, द हिंदू के वर्ल्ड व्यू में आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं सुहासिनी हैदर। इस हफ्ते की शुरुआत में दुनिया भर में डर का माहौल था जब अमेरिकी राष्ट्रपति डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने ईरान को अमेरिकी मांगों का पालन करने या सबसे बुरा परिणाम भुगतने के लिए 48 घंटे की समय सीमा निर्धारित कर दिया। युद्ध के 39वें दिन एक सोशल मीडिया पोस्ट में, जिसकी पोप सहित दुनिया भर में आलोचना हुई, ट्रंप ने कहा, एक पूरी सभ्यता मर जाएगी जो फिर कभी लौटकर वापस नहीं आ सकेगा। ईरान ने इस पर और कड़ी प्रतिक्रिया दी। ईरान के राष्ट्रपति मसूद पेजेश्कियन ने कहा कि 14 मिलियन ईरानियों ने युद्ध लड़ने पर हस्ताक्षर कर दिए हैं। जैसे जैसे ट्रंप द्वारा तय की गई समय सीमा नजदीक आती गई, ईरानियों ने अमेरिकी बमबारी को चुनौती देने के लिए पुलों और परमाणु स्थलों पर मानव श्रृंखलाएं बनानी शुरू कर दी। हालांकि सबसे बुरा दौर नहीं आया, क्योंकि अमेरिका और ईरान ने पाकिस्तान के प्रधानमंत्री के अनुरोध को स्वीकार कर लिया, जिसमें चीन सहित कई अन्य देशों ने भूमिका निभाई थी, और 2 सप्ताह के लिए युद्ध विराम की घोषणा कर दी गई। एक ऐसा निर्णय जिसके कारण अब इस्लामाबाद में अमेरिका ईरान वार्ता की योजना बनी है। इस घोषणा का दुनिया भर में स्वागत हुआ और भारत ने भी इस फैसले का स्वागत करते हुए हॉर्मुज जलडमरू मध्य को तुरंत खोलने का आह्वान किया। युद्ध विराम, बातचीत और जलडमरू मध्य पर अभी भी काम चल रहा है, लेकिन वो अभी तक खुला नहीं है। लेकिन ट्रंप के शब्दों ने अलग तरह की चिंताओं को जन्म दिया है। क्या होगा अगर सभ्यता को मिटा देने की धमकी सिर्फ धमकी ना रहकर हकीकत बन जाए? क्या उन्होंने परमाणु बम गिराने की धमकी दी थी? वर्ल्ड व्यू के इस विशेष और एक्सक्लूसिव शो में मैंने IAEA के महानिदेशक राफेल ग्रॉसी से बातचीत की है और उनसे ईरानी परमाणु स्थलों पर अमेरिका इजराइल के हमलों, ट्रंप के सोशल मीडिया पर पोस्ट और ईरान के परमाणु कार्यक्रम के बारे में चिंताओं पर उनसे सवाल पूछे।
How worried are you that the kind of conflict we've seen already, the strikes near Bushehr, Isfahan, other nuclear sites, have already had some kind of an impact in terms of the dangers of a leak?
Well, in that respect, you are asking very specifically about radiological consequences, and there have been none so far, which doesn't mean that what has been happening is not serious and grave. I want to be very clear about this. But we were very concerned this past weekend when a number of quite direct hits were seen inside the premises of the Bushehr nuclear power plant. And we have been in touch, of course, with all sides, with Iran, with Israel, with the United States, and also with Russia, I should say, because this is a plant that has been built and it is at least partially operated by the state company Rosatom from Russia. So we have been engaging in some consultations with all in order to try to prevent the occurrence of this type of events in the future. So far, so good. But of course, it's something that should never happen. Yeah.
But could I ask you how you felt? On Tuesday, as the deadline was emerging, Mr. Trump put out a statement saying a civilization could die. His vice president spoke about using extreme measures. Everybody seemed to be holding their breath. We saw Iranians creating these human chains around nuclear sites as well. Was there a point which you were worried?
Well, I'm always worried. The IAEA, we are always on alert. And in particular, we have been playing a role on 2 ongoing wars. One that has reached a ceasefire point, another that hasn't. between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So we are always on a state of alert. Of course, there was a concern, but at the same time, even President Trump was saying that there were intense negotiations ongoing. So there's always the hope, and thanks to the very efficient work of mediation, your neighbors in Pakistan, but Egypt as well, and some others were trying to bring the two belligerent together in some way to try to at least mark this pause, which is going to last for a couple of weeks. And it's good to see that the diplomatic effort is starting in just a couple of days. So yes, the concern is always there, and it will continue to be until we find, as I was saying, a permanent agreement.
Certainly, but I do want to ask the trend the world is going into 80 years after we did see an atomic bomb being used. We're seeing these two conflicts in which you have to use nuclear diplomacy to try and get the parties involved to take a step back. When it came to Zaporizhia in Ukraine, I think the Indian side was also asked to convey certain messages. How dangerous do you think this trend is? That nuclear is not off limits in a certain sense.
In a certain sense, we are moving into that kind of space, which was not the case before. Of course, we have been coexisting and living with nuclear weapons for the past 80 years, and they are a reality. But we see with these conflicts, which do recognize some nuclear dimension, and with the possible reverberations and impact of what may happen if there is any use or threat of use of nuclear weapons, we see that this eventuality, this hypothetical situation, which was, if not distant, contained in the space of the doctrinal deterrence idea or concept. Now we see more conversation, between quotes, about it, and oblique, and not so oblique sometimes, references to nuclear weapons. So indeed, it is a moment of reflection, is a moment where we, at the level of the international community, the IEA, the United Nations, of course, have to reflect upon these realities to make sure that we do not get to a moment where nuclear weapons, even in a limited way, would be used.
I do want to come to your plans for the United Nations, but I did want to ask, a few days after the strikes, the first US-Israel strikes on Iran, you actually said very clearly there was no evidence that Iran was moving towards a nuclear weapon. As DG IAEA, how did you deal with the pressure that must have been there from the US and Israel and others as they made their case for war, saying Iran has enriched beyond 60% and that it was making a bomb? How did you deal with that pressure?
Well, the pressure is always there when you are dealing with matters that go to the heart of international peace and security. There is no way around it. In this particular case, we have been trying to keep an objective line. And objectivity, of course, is difficult. And so what you will see is that people will take the first half of a sentence, the sentence that accommodates their view of a problem, forgetting the rest. And when it comes to this, we have been very, very clear in the sense that while there is no evidence of a systematic, organized, permanent, institutionalized program to manufacture nuclear weapons, and I have said it and I have repeated in reports, there were other elements as well that should be considered so that we have a full picture. Nothing more, nothing less. The accumulation, the continued accumulation of highly enriched uranium, some things that Iran was not responding to. And I think this must be dealt with objectivity. Some people say it's incredible that you say this. No, we are telling the truth. And we have been doing this. It's not new. I have been saying this in my periodical reports to the board of governors of the Iaea, for example. So whilst we do not want to create false impressions, we have to say things as they are and as they have been checked by our inspectors. But of course, pressures are always there, and it would be unnatural that they are not existing. It may be uncomfortable for me, even for my personal life. As you know, we have been subject to threats and things like this. But the objective is peace. The objective is to prevent situations of conflict that may lead to war.
And to turn to your candidacy for UN Secretary General this year, in your vision statement, you say the United Nations must return to its founding promise to save humanity from the scourge of war, so to prevent war. I want to begin by asking you about your candidacy, what you see as what you can achieve, but also of your decision to stay on as DG IAEA, even as you run for UNSG, which is considered unusual.
The UN is firmly based on a number of pillars. Peace and security is one. Equally important is development, and human rights and humanitarian issues are also very important, all interrelated. But we are in a world at war. War has returned in a furious way to in different parts of the world, even in your country and in the neighborhood and in Southeast Asia. We have seen it in Cambodia, Thailand. We have seen it in Azerbaijan, Armenia. We see it in Sudan and South Sudan. We see it in East Congo and Rwanda. We see it, of course, in Ukraine and Russia. So this is the reality. This is not because we are sidelining other aspects which are every bit as important, let me reiterate. But when the world is at war in the way it is, I think we need to recognize and to remember in the first place why the United Nations were established after the cataclysmic events of the Second World War. And this is what is fundamental in this regard. And obviously, the IEA and myself, I have been engaging with the belligerents. We have been preventing nuclear accidents. We have been trying to move into the solution of this issue in Iran. So this is why, and this is in a certain sense what inspired me to do what I'm doing. And this connects with the other. How irresponsible it would be for me to take leave when all these things are happening and when the IAEA is having all these responsibilities within its mandate. I don't think there is any contradiction or conflict of interest. On the contrary, I would argue, on the contrary, for someone who is aspiring to have this higher role, to leave his or her responsibilities behind, for me, would be a dereliction of duty, honestly speaking.
राफेल ग्रॉसी का पूरा साक्षात्कार आप नीचे दिए गए लिंक के साथ द हिंदू ओरिजिनल्स पर देख सकते हैं। राफेल ग्रॉसी संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासचिव के लिए अपने अभियान, संयुक्त राष्ट्र सुधार की योजनाओं और परमाणु आपूर्तिकर्ता समूह NSG में भारत की संभावनाओं के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं। वर्ल्ड व्यू पर हमारे पास आज इतना ही, लेकिन हमारी टीम की इजाजत दीजिए। अगले हफ्ते फिर मिलेंगे। आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।